Imagine this. You're on a plane, settling into your seat, and the captain is giving the pre-flight briefing. Then, the flight attendant gets on the PA system, but it's not the usual instructions. It's an urgent, unprecedented warning that is broadcast to everyone. The warning was specific and chilling. If you own a Samsung Galaxy Note 7, you must power it down immediately. Do not charge it. Do not use it. The flight crew emphasized that if it started smoking, you were to place it in a special fireproof bag immediately. This wasn't a scene from a sci-fi movie or a fictional scenario. That was real life for millions of travelers in the fall of 2016, affecting flights worldwide. The device being referenced was meant to be Samsung's greatest triumph. The phone, which was heralded as the pinnacle of modern smartphone engineering, had transformed into a ticking thermal bomb. It was supposed to crush the competition and elevate Samsung's brand. Instead, it executed a spectacular, self-inflicted wound. This incident quickly became one of the most devastating technology scandals in modern history. It was a failure of colossal proportions that cost one of the world's largest companies billions of dollars. This disaster was swift, unexpected, and globally recognized. This is the true story of the Samsung Galaxy Note 7, a device that soared for a fleeting moment of glory. It ultimately crashed in a ball of fire, taking an entire, beloved product line with it into the history of product fails. Welcome back to Tech Fails, where we examine technical disasters. To fully understand the scale of this unprecedented disaster, you have to first remember where Samsung stood in 2016. They were unquestionably the reigning kings of the Android world, and perhaps the only company consistently challenging Apple for smartphone supremacy. They set the standard for Android hardware. The Note line in particular was Samsung's showpiece device, their technological flagship. It pioneered the phablet category, proving that big phones were desirable and powerful. The Note came complete with the beloved S Pen stylus and a hard-earned reputation for housing only bleeding-edge technology. The Note 7 was therefore supposed to be the undisputed champion of that year's smartphone cycle. Launched in August 2016, it was touted as sleek, incredibly powerful, water-resistant, and introduced the futuristic iris scanner technology. It genuinely looked like a masterpiece. Initial reviews were ecstatic and overwhelmingly positive. Leading critics immediately called it the best smartphone ever made at that time, praising its features and design. Samsung was riding incredibly high on this wave of almost universal adoration. They had a key strategic target in mind: beat the forthcoming iPhone 7 to market and cement their technological lead. This massive competitive pressure, the relentless chase for immediate innovation and market dominance, is precisely where the trouble began. Speed kills, and in this specific case, speed almost literally killed a lot of people's property, if not the people themselves. The rush to innovate and deliver a perfect product created a disastrous oversight in the manufacturing process. The core component that enables the massive power and sleek, thin design of modern smartphones is, of course, the lithium-ion battery. This specific technology is truly incredible in its energy density, but it is also inherently volatile and demanding. It is essentially a delicate chemical balancing act confined within a tiny space. Inside every cell, there are two separate electrodes, a positive cathode and a negative anode. These critical electrodes are separated by an extremely thin layer called a separator. All of these components are then immersed in a flammable liquid electrolyte, which carries the charge. The entire system is highly dependent on that fragile separator. If those electrodes touch at any point due to physical damage or a defect, you immediately get an internal short circuit. That short circuit leads to a rapid, uncontrolled rise in internal temperature. This terrifying phenomenon is what scientists call a thermal runaway, which is self-sustaining. And in a confined, sealed space like the body of a smartphone, a thermal runaway means only one thing: fire, dense smoke, and a potential explosion. The phone essentially becomes a miniature jet engine of heat and flame. Samsung's engineers, driven by the mandate to cram a high-capacity 3,500 milliamp hour battery into an incredibly slim chassis, pushed the physical limits. They also had to make the phone water-resistant, adding further complexity to the housing. The final battery design, which was supplied primarily by a Samsung subsidiary known as SDI, possessed two critical, fatal flaws. These flaws resulted from the aggressive specifications required for the phone's form factor. The first flaw was a severe design pinch within the phone's case. The curvature of the device's frame was so tight that it actually pinched the corner of the battery, causing pressure on the ultra-thin separator layer inside. The second flaw was a profound lack of sufficient space. The battery's cell pouch design simply didn't have enough room to safely accommodate the electrodes, leaving virtually no margin for error against internal physical stress. The essential margin of safety, which is already wafer thin with modern high-energy density batteries, was entirely eliminated by these flaws. It was a failed project before it even reached the shelves and before the first consumer used it. The disturbing reports started coming in almost immediately after the August launch. Initially, they were isolated incidents, but they were deeply concerning from the start. Stories began to emerge in the news of devices causing severe property damage. There was an instance of a car catching fire, another of a hotel room filling with smoke, and a homeowner's garage being damaged by the ignited device. In the early, crucial days of September 2016, the floodgates opened completely. People were posting photos all over social media of their beloved, brand new, expensive smartphones. These once shiny devices were now completely charred, smoking, and irrevocably damaged beyond recognition. Samsung quickly realized they had an unmitigated technical disaster on their hands that was rapidly gaining global attention. Faced with this devastating, rapidly unfolding crisis, Samsung acted quickly. Perhaps, in hindsight, they acted too quickly, without full knowledge of the entire problem. On the 2nd of September 2016, less than 2 weeks after the phone's initial launch, Samsung suspended sales worldwide. They then announced a massive, unprecedented global voluntary recall of approximately 2.5 million devices already sold. They placed the initial blame on a manufacturing defect found in a specific batch of batteries. These particular batteries were the ones supplied by their subsidiary, Samsung SDI. It was a huge and unprecedented initial move, but one that was initially applauded by the public and analysts for its speed and decisiveness. The company promised customers brand new, safe replacement phones. These replacement devices were guaranteed to be safe and were to use batteries sourced from a different supplier. The new supplier was an external company known as ATL, or Amperex Technology Limited. The replacement program was rolled out with extreme speed, and consumers sighed in relief globally. The company took a huge hit to its stock value and its reputation, but the developing narrative seemed to be, mistakes happen, but Samsung fixed it. They were tragically wrong, terribly, catastrophically wrong about the scope of the problem. The second wave of spontaneous fires began immediately in October. The fear quickly turned into a renewed crisis of even greater magnitude. A replacement Note 7, one of the supposedly safe devices, started smoking violently on a Southwest Airlines flight. This forced an immediate evacuation of the aircraft and caused widespread panic. Other replacement phones, the ones deemed safe by Samsung's initial investigation, were also quickly overheating, smoking, and igniting. It became clear that the problem was far deeper and more complex than initially thought. The terrifying truth was that the problem was not isolated to just one single supplier. It was entirely systemic within the phone's design. It turned out that the new ATL-sourced batteries had manufacturing flaws of their own. These secondary flaws included welding defects and missing insulation tape in the cell construction. These issues were also causing the same internal short circuits and thermal runaways. This second failure, the tragic failure of the promised fix, was the definitive death blow to the product line. It immediately stripped away any remaining consumer trust that the brand might have had. This repeated failure exposed the terrifying truth. Samsung did not yet know exactly what was wrong with its flagship phone. They had fatally rushed the replacement program without fully completing their investigation. The image of the Samsung brand instantly went from that of a cutting-edge innovator to a manufacturer of fire hazards. Their safety credibility was severely damaged in the eyes of the public and the regulators. Aviation authorities around the world had already issued stern warnings regarding the phone. But after the second wave of fires, the FAA and other international regulators stepped in with permanent, decisive action. They effectively banned the device entirely from all commercial aircraft. This was an iconic, humiliating moment that the company will never live down. Travelers globally were forced to turn their phones in before boarding flights or face being denied passage altogether. The Note 7 was officially now a forbidden object, a sunset product forcefully retired by the safety concerns of an entire planet. On the 11th of October 2016, a mere 55 days after its highly anticipated launch, Samsung permanently discontinued the Galaxy Note 7. Production immediately ceased. The phone was officially and finally dead. The financial consequences of this massive technology scandal were truly staggering. The recall easily placed the Note 7 incident among the most expensive failures in corporate history. The total estimated cost of the recall, plus lost sales and the halt of all production, was eventually projected to be well over $5 billion through early 2017. The direct losses alone were crushing to the bottom line. One market analysis even suggested that the long-term cost to the company, factoring in lost revenue and the necessary marketing to repair the damaged brand, could have ultimately exceeded $17 billion. It was a colossal financial hit. The stock market reacted with understandable carnage and extreme volatility. Samsung's stock value plummeted almost instantly, wiping billions of dollars off its market capitalization in just a few dreadful days. Beyond the finances, the logistics of the recall were an absolute nightmare of epic proportions. The company had to successfully retrieve approximately 3 million highly dangerous devices from consumers worldwide. They were forced to ship the phones back in special fireproof boxes. These unique boxes came complete with ceramic fiber, paper, and instructions warning customers not to ship them by air under any circumstances. The specialized packaging was a visual symbol of the phone's dangerous nature, communicating the true risk. The intangible cost to Samsung's brand reputation was perhaps the most enduring and damaging element of the crisis. This wasn't just a phone that failed to sell as a commercial flop. It was a phone that literally posed a severe physical danger to its users and their property. For a brand built entirely on trust, quality manufacturing, and precise engineering, this disaster cut to the very heart of their corporate identity. It challenged their raison d'être, the fundamental reason for their success. The public outcry was so intense that it forced Samsung to undergo one of the most comprehensive and transparent internal investigations ever seen in the industry. They had to be completely honest about their errors. Over 700 dedicated engineers and researchers were put on the case. They rigorously tested more than 200,000 devices and 30,000 batteries to find the core flaw. They finally concluded that the issue was indeed a mix of aggressive internal design specifications. These specs left absolutely no room for normal manufacturing variation, combined with distinct flaws from both primary battery suppliers. The blame was laid squarely with the company's own internal design and quality control processes. These critical processes had been dangerously compromised by the intense, self-imposed rush to beat the competition to market. The story of the Galaxy Note 7 is not just a tale of catastrophic commercial failure. It's a crucial and necessary case study in corporate crisis management and the profound lessons learned from historical technical disasters. Lesson number 1 is clear. Safety must always prevail over speed. Samsung's ambition and constant drive to maximize space blinded them to fundamental and critical safety concerns. The lesson remains that no marketing win, no perfect benchmark score, and no slimness profile is worth compromising the basic, fundamental safety of a product that is carried in millions of users' pockets every day. That margin of safety is non-negotiable. Lesson number 2, never suffer the 2 recall death blow. The biggest mistake wasn't the initial technical flaw. It was the second entirely failed attempt at a replacement. By rushing the initial investigation and replacement, Samsung doubled the damage to their reputation and bottom line. They communicated a solution they couldn't possibly guarantee, turning a massive crisis into a near-fatal one. It shows that in any crisis, absolute transparency and a complete, verified diagnosis are always far more important than a hasty, unproven fix. Take the time to get the diagnosis right. Lesson number 3, the birth of a new standard for the entire industry. To its credit, Samsung did not try to hide from the disaster. They owned every aspect of it. They published the full, extensive findings of their investigation publicly for the world to see and learn from. More importantly, they instituted a rigorous new process they called the 8-point battery safety check. This stringent process involves everything from physical durability testing and visual inspections. It also includes X-ray scanning and accelerated usage tests that simulate years of use in mere days. This new standard wasn't just for Samsung's benefit either. The Note 7's fire became a crucible that ultimately forged new, much higher safety standards for the entire global mobile phone industry going forward. The technology itself may remain inherently volatile, but the processes for handling it had to become absolutely bulletproof. This was the silver lining forged in the heat of the technical disaster. The Note series, which became a failed project in its 7th iteration, did not stay dead forever. Samsung successfully followed up the entire ordeal with the launch of the Note 8. The Note 8 was a device that had to work twice as hard to regain a fraction of the consumer trust that had been lost with its predecessor. They managed to rise from the ashes of their exploding phone to reclaim their position. However, the deep scars from this incident remain in the minds of the consumers and the company's memory. The Samsung Galaxy Note 7 is now a permanent, fiery monument in the dark history of technology scandals. It serves as a stark reminder that at the dangerous intersection of cutthroat market competition and the delicate physics of modern technology, even the smallest oversight in design or manufacturing can instantly create a $5 billion inferno. It was the highly ambitious phone that was simply too good to be true. And in the end, it was a truly spectacular and devastating fail. What other landmark technology disaster do you want us to put under the microscope next? Let us know in the comments below.